Good day and welcome to Barely Compiled Games. Today we're going to implement the dialogue system. All I have right now is the default third-person template, and in part 1 we're going to design the entire widget used for our dialogue, and in part 2 we're going to add interactivity to our system. Let's dive into it, shall we? I'm just going to create a new folder called dialogue, keep everything neat and tidy. And what we're going to need is a widget blueprint, first of all. Let's call this one widget blueprint underscore dialogue. And the first thing we're going to do is go to our graph and add two variables. They're both added as a boolean, but let's make both of them a text. Then we'll call this one name and dialogue. And in the settings of both of them, we need to expose this on spawn and make it instance editable. And what this will do is it will give us the option when we create our widget to set these values. So from there, let's go back to our designer and start designing. We'll need to start with a canvas panel, and this will just show us the entire player screen, basically. So what I want to do is get an overlay, and this will be our dialog box. I'm going to create a classic dialog box at the bottom, and here I will set the offset everywhere to 0, the alignment to 1, the other alignment on the right side to 1, and now we can just play with the Y value to set the height. And I'm gonna leave this at around 300. So this overlay, we can drag multiple things in this and it will overlay them. So we're going to start with an image. This will be our background. And this doesn't really need to be a variable, I don't think. So what we're going to do is just make it black. Maybe have a little bit of opacity. I'm going to leave it at 0.8. From this point, what I'd like to do is add two more, but we're going to do that in a stack box. So we're going to put the stack box in our overlay, and what a stack box is going to do, if we set the horizontal alignment and vertical alignment like we did with our image, we can fill up the entire overlay. And this stack box, this will stack items on top of each other, or currently next to each other because it's set on horizontal. If we set this to vertical, it will now stack our items like so. Our text block will be here, and I want a rich text block for our text. So we can just call this one dialogue text, and we can just call this one name text. Make this a variable. Make this a variable. And as you can see, our dialogue text, if we just put something in here, will go under here. And it will have a weird font, but we're going to fix that later. First thing we want to do is here in the size, set it to fill. So now this entire thing will be our dialogue text. And then on top here will be our name. Our name text can actually be very simply set to our name by setting the link here. Create a new binding, and in this binding we're going to grab our name, which we just configured, and put it in there. So now that is always going to be our name. Now for this, what we want to do is on construct, if we go back to our graph and then our event graph, which you can also find in the graphs, there's an event construct. Let me delete the things we don't need. And on construct, what I want to do is get our dialog text and then set text to our dialog. And there we go. Now our text will be set. And our text will be set to whatever we have on create. So if I were to set some text here, as you can see, we have this weird font here, and that's because we don't have a text style set yet. So for rich text, a text style set defines exactly how your text should look. So what we can do is go to miscellaneous and create a new data table. This data table we will give a structure of rich text style row. Let's call this our text style for now. What I want to do initially is put this in here. When we go to the text style and we add a new row, let's just call this our default row. As you can see now, we can set up our font and our color. Because we didn't have a font before, I'm just going to make this white. We didn't see anything and we just saw the error icon, basically. So in the font family, we're going to select Roboto. This is in the engine, you don't need to do anything for that. If you don't see this, go up to your content drawer, go to settings, and in here you have show engine content, which you can enable or disable. So if I disable this, I have no results, and that is how it is by default. If I, however, enable it, now I can select Roboto, which is just the default, basically. So we now have text style, but we need to save this and then recompile this, and now you can see that it uses our new style, just Roboto with the font size and color we chose. If we change this color to a very ugly orange, and we recompile, it will become orange. So let's keep that white for now, and make our, oh, it's already bold. Very nice. Then our name is bold. And what I want to do, because it's now very stuck to the sides, is add a little bit of padding. 25 may be a little high, actually 10. And also add 10 here. So now we have a little bit of space between, which looks a lot better. Now this is all we have to do for our dialog blueprint. But to actually spawn it in, we can go to our third person character. And I would like to add a new interact input to this. As you can see, we have all these different inputs. Let's add a new one. So in our input folder, which we get, we have the new input mapping context, and here we have actions. So if I copy this one, the move, and just say interact, this is actually the wrong type. Maybe it would have been easier to copy jump, but our value type needs to be a digital bool because it won't have any analog input to it. So normally with WASD or the controller, you can have an input because you just move the stick half, or with the triggers on the back of a controller, you can also have an input, which is super cool. But for just pressing one button, it won't really work like that. And then on the triggers, we can have pressed. Actually, let's do a released. So then when we release it, it will just work. Important to also add it to our mapping context. So let's add input action interact. You can press this little keyboard and then E to select E. This little keyboard is basically it sets it to the next value you enter, which is very easy because if you search E here, you get gamepad and all that kind of stuff, and it's finding the E in there is a little hard. So this is a lot easier. So now that our interact is done, we can now call it from here. Now that we have our interact, let's create a function to set dialog. And what we want to do here is pretty simple. We're going to create our widget of widget blueprint dialog, and we're going to promote this to a variable, not a local one, just a full-on variable. And let's call this current dialog. Now, we actually don't want to create this if it is already valid. So we're going to check is valid. And if it is valid, we're not going to do anything. If it is not valid, we're going to create it, set our current dialog to a value. So this will basically say, oh, now you can't use it anymore because it's no longer value. And we need to add it to the viewport. So what we can do now is have name, add pin node, and that will add it as an input. And the same thing for the dialog. Now we have our set dialog. Now on interact we can just call our set dialog and say test. This is a test. If we play and press E, it will say test, this is a test. And if I press E more, it won't work. But it won't close yet. So what I would really like to do in here, we're going to set timer by function name. And this time can also be added as an input. And that's the time it's going to be on screen. And then the function name will be clear dialog. So now in the background, there's just going to be a timer for a certain amount of time. Let's set the default actually to something like 2 seconds. And then it will call clear dialog, which we haven't created yet. So let's create a new function, call it clear dialog. From here, we're going to set current dialog to nothing, but first we're going to remove from parent. And then we're going to set it to nothing. So then our E will work again. So now, if I press play, if I press E, this is a test, and after 2 seconds it will disappear. And I can press E again to trigger it again. But this is way more fun if we can set it up via our NPCs, which is what we're going to do in the next part.